back. This is In Depth. I am Dan Haggerty. Let's continue our segment on age limits in politics. And I want to start with an email I got from Carl. He said, as for age, you left the president out tonight. Talking about last night's coverage. And since Carl and I don't want anyone to feel left out, maybe we'll begin there tonight. The Wall Street Journal just released a new poll about how Joe Biden's age might affect his electability and found Biden's age may be a growing problem for his reelection. According to the poll, most Americans think he's too old. Joe Biden is 80 years old. He'll be 81 in November. He'd be 86 by the end of his second term if he wins re-election. He's already the oldest president in history. The second oldest president in history was our last president, Donald Trump. He turned 77 this summer. Now, to put this into more perspective, former President Bill Clinton is younger than both of them and was elected when I was 11 years old. This YouGov poll from 2022 found more than half of Americans support a maximum age. Then CBS News and YouGov, they teamed up for an even bigger poll that found even more Americans, like 3 out of 4 people from every party and age group they could find, think that we should have age limits for our politicians. And most people think that age should be 70 years old. And right now, that would make 25% of Congress ineligible. Now think about that. 1 in every 4 politicians in Washington gone and several others unable to run again because they would be too old. We started this conversation last night after the Capitol physician met with this man, Mitch McConnell, after his recent freezes during news conferences and concluded they show no sign of being a stroke or seizure. A viewer named Catherine made this great point. She emailed me at dan@WRAL.com this morning and said, you do know he fell not long ago and he has a concussion. No matter where you come down on age cutoffs, it is not clear McConnell is the best example. But first, let's be clear. McConnell had a concussion after his fall in May, but the theory that these freezes are a direct result of that now 4 months later is not definitive. But let's think about Catherine's point for a moment. Let's say a 40-year-old lawmaker had a concussion and months later he was freezing up. It would certainly make the news, but she's right. It wouldn't jumpstart conversations about age limits. That said, to say McConnell's age is inconsequential here is a bit disingenuous. So let's take a moment and take a look at age and what we know about it, considering there are more old people living today than ever before. And it's helped scientists learn a lot more about what happens to our minds. Harvard Med School sums it up like this, quote, scientists used to think that brain connections developed at a rapid pace in the first few years of life until you reached your mental peak in your early 20s. Your cognitive abilities would level off at around middle age and then start to gradually decline. We now know this is not true. MIT published The Rise and Fall of Cognitive Skills after a partnership with neuroscientists at Harvard. They gathered data on 50,000 people and found that in reality, different parts of our brains actually work better at different ages. Here's a chart that explains it pretty well. They found that your processing speed peaks in your late teens and then declines rapidly. You're best at learning new things and remembering names in your early 20s. This declines slowly. Short-term memory peaks from 25 to 35, and you're best at remembering faces in your early 30s. Social cognition and your ability to detect others' emotions peaks in your late 40s. And lastly, something that surprised researchers, your vocabulary skills don't seem to peak at all, but instead continue to improve even after the age of 65. They also revealed something that struck me as significantly profound, that while most areas of the brain do decline slowly with age, the connections between different parts of our brain actually strengthen, helping us to see the big picture more clearly, saying, quote, perhaps this is the foundation of wisdom. It is as if with age, your brain becomes better at seeing the entire forest and worse at seeing the leaves. All that to say, we must return to the obvious. Cognitive decline with age is guaranteed, especially after 65, and the potential for more serious complications increases exponentially as you approach 80 and older. That's why some lawmakers have suggested regular cognitive tests for aging leaders. Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana said, I'm told there have been senators in the past who at the end of their Senate terms were senile. That's obviously a problem if it's true. But his ideas haven't of these tests for lawmakers haven't gained much traction. Though, in the end, all of this is still in our hands, isn't it? A viewer named Pat said it best. Pat said, Dan, we already have term limits and age limits. If you want, it's called voting. Tell me what you think on this issue or any other. Email me at dan@wral.com. Tell me what's on your mind. And as always, we will go in depth.